Hey, how's it going, everyone? Dark Matter Editing here, showing you my very first After Effects tutorial. In today's lesson, we're going to focus the discussion around new learners or beginners who are jumping into the program for the very first time. Today, I'll demonstrate how to make a brand new composition and teach you how to position yourself when creating your very first After Effects production, as well as future productions. My intention with this tutorial and future ones is to make things as easy as possible to understand to the layperson. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to do is create a new composition. So we're going to go up to Composition, New Composition, and then we'll just go ahead and name this first. And then down here, we're going to look at the preset. Now, I've created my own preset, which is 4K video, because that's how I like my movies to be created. But if you like 1080p, for example, you can go in here and look that up. So here's a 1080p preset. But this number here, 29.97, represents the frame rate. Now, if you click on any of these, you can still modify the settings in there later. So let's say I want 1080p, but 60 FPS, frames per second. I can change that value, and then we can save that over here where this little note looking item is. And then we can call this 1080p 60 FPS, for example, and hit save. Now, I'm not going to do that. I have a 4K monitor. So we're going to go back to the 4K selection, but this 4K will not be automatically set up. You'd have to click on one of these other ones here where my mouse is, UHD 4K with the FPS of your liking. And again, I like 60 FPS because it's a smoother presentation, but it is going to be a bigger file size in the end. So if your hard drive's not big, you may want to consider lowering that FPS. Okay, so on the next section here, we have the resolution. So I like to start with quarter. And the reason for this is because it just makes things faster when you're previewing your production. You can start with full if you want and change it later. But for right now, we're going to do quarter. And down here, we're going to do 10 seconds. So these numbers here represent hour, minutes, seconds, and then I guess nanoseconds or whatever the term is for that. Background color, you could pick anything you want. I like black because it's easier on the eyes. So we're going to hit OK. Now, the background color isn't actually an item in your video. That is just, the standard color that you're looking at when you load up your new production. Now, what we're going to do next is understand the right-hand side here where I have these panels. Now, they call this the workspace. That's kind of the lingo they use. If we take a look at preview, that's when you're previewing your video for the very first time. There are some settings here, like the shortcut button's important. I like to hit the space bar when I'm doing my preview, so I don't have to keep coming over here and clicking on this panel. But I like to have it here anyways, just in case I need it. So we'll click on that to fold it down. Effects and presets, probably the most important panel to use. You can download more effects online or pay for them. The align. Now this one is a lifesaver for me. I'm very OCD, so when I like to center text or I like to center a picture, what this will do is it will align the text or picture in the center of the screen here in your video. Moving on to character. This is like your text editor. This is kind of like Photoshop where you're editing your text and how far apart the letters are from each other, the font size and the font itself. You can download more later. There is a way to scale up your text or scale down your text regardless of this panel, but this is a starting point. And then moving on to paragraph, this is kind of a center tool. You don't have to use this, but I like to use it just in case I need it. Okay, so now that we've gone ahead and shown you panels and creating a composition, let's go ahead and start putting stuff into our composition so we can see how this all works. So at the top of corner, you'll see our text tool. Now there's two. There's vertical and horizontal text. So that should be apparent what that means. I'm going to choose horizontal for now. If you want to change this, you just hold down your click button and then drag over and select the one that you want. So let's go ahead and click out into the background. We're going to type in tutorial. And then I like to kind of click over here on the bottom left that way I don't touch anything else that's in my project. Now there's a couple ways of changing the size of the text. So you can come down here to the text item and then hit S on your keyboard, which represents scale. Or if you don't know the hotkey, you can just hit this little arrow and this will fold it down. And then there's transform and then scale down here. Once you learn the hotkeys, it becomes a lot faster and easier. For example, anchor point will be like the center of the text item itself. So if I go ahead and scrub this number to the right, you'll notice the anchor point is moving. And I usually like to kind of get this to the center when I can. And then, so the number here represents horizontal position. And then the second number is vertical. And sometimes there's 3 numbers. So in a 3D text environment where you make this text 3D, there'll be a third number. And that would represent the z-axis. So that would be forward and backwards, as if you're pushing and pulling the text into the screen or toward you as the person looking at it. But we're not going to get into that for this tutorial. So now that we've set our anchor point in the center, we're going to go ahead and center the actual text. So I'm going to click this arrow to fold it back down. And if you're wondering how I'm zooming in and out, I'm just using my scroll wheel, by the way. But if you don't want to use a scroll wheel, you can zoom in and out over here on the zoom menu. Okay, so let's click on this text item. We're going to go over to our panels on the right, choose Align, and then we're going to click the middle icon on the left side and then the right side. That is going to center our text. I'm going to do Control S to save. You could also do File and Save up here. Okay, now the next thing we're going to show is how to increase the size. Now, you can either go to the character panel and change the size here under where it says this 300. So let's try maybe 450. Oh, sorry, I got to select the text first. So I'm going to double click to highlight the text. We'll do 400. Now what this does is it will uncenter it. So if you click the text again, or you can double click, whichever you prefer, go back to Align, 2 middle buttons, that will align it. Control S to save. So makes your life a lot easier when you have this Align button. Otherwise, you'd have to click the text, and then on the top left corner, there's a selection tool. So we click Selection Tool, and then you'll be able to drag the text item around on your background. So I like to go down to the bottom left, right click, New, and then here are some options. We have New Text, New Solid, New Light, New Camera, New Null Object, and then Adjustment Layer. Some of these other ones I don't really use, but you can. Like you can import an Adobe Photoshop file. Lights and cameras are for 3D. Null Object I use quite a bit, like usually when I'm setting up a wiggler effect. And then Shape Layer, I don't use very often because I like to mess with masks. But a shape layer would be like, you're trying to make triangles or hexagons or something like that. But this is very useful, and we'll show you that in a later tutorial as well. But for now, we're going to do solid. And on this one, we're just going to call it background. And then leave the settings alone so it matches your comp. You can always hit this Make Comp Size button. So if you mess this up, you could do Make Comp Size, and it will fix itself. Color. Now, this will affect your video. The layers themselves do affect the output of the video. So let's go ahead and do maybe a dark blue. Select anywhere you want. There are color codes here too. So you can, if there's an actual color code you want to copy, you can actually copy this. So every time you make something that's blue, you can use the same exact color each and every time. There's also the color picker too, which I use a lot sometimes just for speed. If you click on this and then drag around your composition, it will actually choose the color that it sees on the screen. And then you just click. So we'll hit OK, and you'll notice here that it made it look like the background disappeared because it's the identical color of After Effects itself. Okay, so now on the very left, it's very important. So like Photoshop, the layers on the top will show before the layers on the bottom. So if you want your text to show up, you would never put this below. All right, everybody. Well, I really appreciate you watching my very first tutorial. You'll see more in the future. So please like and subscribe, And then if you have any questions, feel free to leave comments in the video, and I will see you on the next one.